This is what you're looking at as far as the ultimate content generator. It's an updated version of my previous workflow that was generating content for WordPress. I've integrated Airtable and also updated the content generation portion. I've also added the ability to input the RankMath SEO plugin data. In this case, it's the keyword that's being used, as well as the meta description for the blog post. Then in the final part of this, it will generate the image and upload that image as a featured image for that blog post. Then you'll get a notification on Slack to tell you the actual link and the image that's being used. Then finally update Airtable with the status of the blog post. First thing we want to do is set up the brand guidelines for whichever brand you're working with, whether it's your own brand or a client's brand. We want to make sure that this is properly filled up in the Airtable base with the mission, vision, core values, tagline, brand story, audience. You can add the logo if you like, but the current workflow does not do any image recognition, so it wasn't really necessary for this purpose. Add the color palette, typography, image style, voice tone, brand do's and don'ts. So make sure that this is filled in because the workflow will first and foremost ingest this data to make sure that it is informed when generating the content. Okay, the next thing we want to prepare before we start generating content is the keywords that we'll be using. This is just an example, and so I'll be using what is n8n as the keyword, and you can see here there are multiple status options here. For our example, we'll just use create. I'm working on some other things where we'll be able to actually generate the list of keywords here so that that part is also automated. You can add some context to the blog post, and the prompt that's going to be sent to OpenAI will also take this into consideration. And then I've also added the reference URL, which the agent will go out and hit the URL before it starts to generate content. You can set the max number of chapters you want for the blog post, as well as the maximum number of keywords here in this Airtable. Before we jump into the workflow, just want to inform you guys about me. I'm Alex Kim, AI native workflow automation architect, building enterprise-grade solutions for SMBs and enterprises alike. And also the video overview for this workflow, the thing you're watching right now, is available on my YouTube channel. And also note that this workflow template is live and available on the n8n template section. The link is here, as well as the Airtable that I am using. I've made a copy for you guys to be able to leverage that and update your information into it. Here's a list of products we use for the workflow, and then a little bit more about me on my website. All right, let's jump into the workflow. So as we typically do, we figure out how we're going to trigger this workflow. And in this case, we're just using the manual trigger. I also have a few other potential triggers for you guys to evaluate, whether you want to set up a form instead of pulling in the data from Airtable. You may just also allow a form input for some of that data. And also I was playing around with the Airbase trigger. What this means is when a certain column in that base is updated, then that will trigger the workflow. But I just want to, for this instance, an example, just use a manual trigger and allow the status in the Airtable to dictate which keywords are going to be updated. Okay, so the first thing we do is make sure that all the settings are properly set before we start generating content. So go ahead and click into this node here where we are pulling in the record from Airtable. So you guys can see it's the content manager base from the brand guidelines table. And I'm just going to pull everything in because, yeah, we're going to use everything that's available there. No filtering, no sorting. Then I aggregate all of those records into a single record. Again, this is so that as I'm using it in the later nodes, it's not broken up into however many records there were here. So you guys can see here, there are, 14 different rows of records. So I don't want to separate those out into a single record or into 14, but rather just aggregate them. Then I'm going to go ahead and get the keywords. I do believe, yeah. So I just pull in all the keywords here. And then if the status is set to create blog post, then it will proceed to the next item. Then the post parameters come into play, where here, based on the status of that keyword in the base, I will pull the keyword, the number of chapters, the maximum number of words. Here, this is your WordPress URL. Make sure that you change this, okay? Please make sure, otherwise you're going to be getting errors because you're not authorized for my blog WordPress URL. And then the context and URL of the reference URL that was set up in Airbase, or Airtable. I keep saying Airbase, but Airtable. So that was, if there's some data there, that will also be pulled in. So now we're ready to go. The way this is set up, it's going to loop over each keyword rather than processing every single keyword all at once. I like to typically do that where this loop is just going to do a batch of one. Just makes it a little bit cleaner when it comes to executions and dealing with errors if anything does happen. So yeah, so we're not generating a million blog posts here. So this is typically something I do that will allow it to be a little bit easier for executions. Okay, so let's look at the settings. Again, I'm sort of re-entering some of that content, right? I could probably remove one of these, but for now, I think I just keep it there because there are some other things I want to do with it later on. So now once this red section of the settings is done, we're going to go ahead and start jumping into the actual content creation. Now let's jump into the actual content creation portion of this, which is the green section of this workflow. First and foremost, we're going to jump into AI node where we are going to use OpenAI to create the post title and structure. And here you guys will see that I have a user prompt, which is listed here. You guys can see some of the title. You can, change maybe the number of characters. See, there's also some instruction for the introduction, chapter instruction, conclusion. So if you want to come in here and do a little bit of prompt engineering, you're welcome to do so. So far it's been good, but I think there's always room for improvement, obviously. So feel free to dive in here and do some more prompt engineering if you wish. Right now it's using the GPT-4o model. Feel free to change it to maybe the mini or any of the other models that might be available. I'm also giving it a system prompt where this is going to pull in all the brand guidelines. Okay, so giving it that context as to what brand and who you are as it's generating content. And then also that context menu. Remember this little bit here from the Airtable base, giving it some additional context into what's being generated. All right, so that is the prompt to start generating the title and the structure. It's going to use Wikipedia for some additional data, as well as that URL that you had entered in the Airtable base. If there was one set, it will go out and pull some additional data for that website, as it's going to inform itself on the content. All right, so next we have some verification of the output. As you can see here, make sure that the titles are available, there are more than one chapters, and so on. So all of this is sort of verification, making sure. And then if you were using the form, this would sort of respond back to the form. I think, another thing we could do is probably go back and redo this. In fact, maybe I just do this, create a little mini loop and go back and output that again. This is pretty straightforward. Split out the chapters. Then we go ahead and start creating the actual chapter text. So again, we pull in some of the previous outputs and we have a prompt here to generate the content. Again, I'm not going to go into this, but you guys can come in here and modify this according to what your final needs are going to be. Again, we're using 4.0 because, mini, as good as it is, I prefer to use 4.0 when it's generating larger content. I've also given it the brand guidelines once again so that it has that as context to generate content. So once that's done running, it's going to merge the titles and the content and then put it all together. Here we have a little bit of code where it's going to create, again, it's going to merge everything together. It's got some formatting here for HTML so that your title and subtitles are set as H2s. This version doesn't go all the way down to H3s. So if you wanted to, again, modify some of the previous prompts to generate H3s, you're welcome to do that as well. But I think H2s are good enough for now. But feel free to comment and let me know if you think we should definitely go to H3. All right, so then we move on to the WordPress section of the work, which is this purple section. So fortunately, n8n does have pre-built WordPress nodes where you can do a lot of different things. So you can see here, page or actions on post, page, or user. We're going to deal with a post, pulling the title from the previous nodes as well as the article itself. We're going to set this as a draft status. If you want to, you can go ahead and go straight to publish, but I wouldn't recommend it. Give yourself a chance to actually review the content before it's actually going live. Okay. If you wanted to set some of the categories or tags possibly for your blog post, feel free to do so. You can also change the slug if you want to, but for this, we're just setting the title, content, and the category. All right, so the next piece here is something that I worked on for quite some time where, if you're familiar with the SEO plugins in WordPress, you either have Yoast, which has been around for a long time and it's a great plugin, or you have RankMath, which is a relatively newer SEO plugin, and in my opinion, a better plugin for SEO. And so part of the challenge when trying to do the automation with WordPress is that there is no way to update the RankMath data in that blog post unless you actually go manually into that post and then copy and paste the keyword and the meta description into the RankMath section of that interface. But what I've done is create a little snippet of code for your functions.php in your theme. If you don't know what that means, it is a PHP file that's part of your theme and it allows you to customize some features. So, what we're doing here is, let me jump into this part of it. What we're doing is we've created a custom API endpoint, and as you can see here, the URL is the WordPress URL we set in the settings. And you can see that this here, the Alex K1919 V1 update meta is a custom endpoint that I added to my WordPress implementation. And that was done by updating the functions.php file. And so if you guys go ahead and, purchase this template it does include the functions.php code snippet that you will need to copy and paste into your functions.php file for your WordPress site. Okay, so if you have questions around that, let me know, but I'm going to show you how to do that as well. So and then we're just going to go ahead and, update the RankMath focus keyword as well as the meta description. So that part is simple, but the tough part is making sure that you've properly updated your functions.php. And I'm going to show you that in this next section before we move on to the featured image. But before that, quick little AI component where this time we're going to use Mini because we have all the bigger content already developed. So write the meta description for RankMath SEO plugin. Here's the output, and this is the text that you're going to use. Okay. So I'm also, again, adding the brand guidelines. So every time I'm just trying to keep feeding it the brand context because we want to make sure our outputs are on brand. Okay, so let me jump into how to actually update your functions.php next. We are looking at my website management interface on SiteGround. And if you're not familiar with SiteGround, it's actually one of the best WordPress hosting providers out there. Over the many years I've been using WordPress, I've gone through a lot of different hosting services, tried hosting things on my own as well, but finally discovered SiteGround, and it's really good. They have built-in caching, security, image optimization. Those are all sort of native to their service without having to add any additional bunch of separate plugins to actually optimize that. So they're doing that at the server level, which is great, and your sites are going to run a lot faster. So just quick note on SiteGround. So here my blog WordPress implementation, and if you guys don't have some sort of a file manager interface for your WordPress hosting, you'll use some sort of FTP access or SSH access. I'm not sure, but you'll need to figure out how to get to this file. Okay, and this file is under your public WP content in your themes, and I use a theme called Neve or Nev, and typically want to set up a child theme. And the reason you set up a child theme for WordPress is as you're making updates or customizations to that theme, for example, updating your functions.php file, if you don't use a child theme and the parent theme is upgraded or updated, which happens often, you're going to overwrite all of those customizations. So making sure that you're using a child theme, any of those customizations will be preserved when the parent theme is updated. So keep that in mind and make sure that you're using a child theme if it's available for the theme that you're using. All right, so let's go to the functions. And here, everything up to line 14 here, do not overwrite that. Let me just reiterate. If you overwrite this, you're going to break your theme. So do not overwrite any of that, okay? So starting from line 7 where it says add this to all sites, you guys can see here that, again, I'm creating a custom route to be able to update my RankMath data. So you can see that here, the meta focus keyword and the meta description are the two items that I'm updating, and I showed you that in the previous section of this video. So all we're doing is adding this file or this snippet of code from line 17 to 41 into your functions.php for your WordPress theme. Hopefully you've got your functions.php properly updated and ready to go. So now let's jump into the featured image portion of this workflow. Here we're going to trigger OpenAI once again. In this case, we're going to use the mini model, and we've got some prompts here where it's telling it that you are a successful image prompt generator. We're making sure that we stay on brand, consider the photo style and camera angles. So here again, you have an opportunity to finesse this for your desired results, giving the language model some context to the keyword, title, and content of the blog post, as well as pulling in the brand guidelines yet once again. Again, I'm trying to do that every single time I hit the language model so that the outputs are going to stay on brand. So I have an additional image prompt here for some more instruction. This one you might want to remove based on the results that you guys get. Okay, so that is the image prompt generator. We're going to aggregate all the output into a single output so that the following nodes don't have to split those out and process those separately. Here we have another prompt setting here. As you can see, we're going to pull in the generated prompt. The model string, guys, here is the specific Leonardo.ai model that I'm going to be using. This is their latest model. Using the API for Leo, you guys can pull down a list of different models, but for this purposes, this is one of the best models to use. So we're going to consider the style, the lighting, the angle of the camera. So that was all part of the prompting and outputs. So this is set so that Leo can create the images based on that. Okay, so here Leonardo also offers a prompt generator. So I'm going to sort of process the image prompt one more time so that it's optimized for Leo, and then we're going to create the image itself. You guys can see here that if you look at this JSON, we're going to create an image that's 1024 by 768. This is the model from the settings. And then in this case, we're going to just generate one image. But if you want to generate more, you can change this number right here. I'm going to use a cinematic style. There are some other presets available. Check out Leonardo.ai for the various presets. Here is the image prompt, the style, the lighting, the angle, and I told it to not include any words or labels. There's some additional settings here. I'm not going to go into it. You can modify these. For example, this ultra one, if you set this to true, it's going to by default create a higher resolution image. But unless you really need that, I would start with the regular, and then you can go back into the Leonardo.ai interface to upscale that image if you really wanted to. All right, so that is the image generator, right? And we do set a wait node here because Leonardo.ai does not have the ability to use webhooks within the API, so I can't add a webhook URL for this workflow and have it sort of respond back with the information I need. But rather, I'm going to actually just wait for the image generator to finish. And here we're going to go get the image ID from the response, right? From the wait here. So we get a bunch of information. And then we're going to download the image and then upload this image back to WordPress. Okay. And then, pretty straightforward, nothing really magical here. So, but you do need to make sure that you download the image first so that that binary file is sort of sitting in the memory or instance of your n8n, and then you can upload that binary file. And what I mean by that is this is, you see here, the output from that download action is the binary file. And you need to do that because you can't pull the file and then upload it directly. You need to actually have this intermediary step of downloading that file before you can take action on that binary file. So we're going to upload the media, and then we're going to use that upload ID for that media. With the Slack notification, what happens is I've created a custom Slack app, and you can see this here in this little app down here. And what this will do is upload the draft URL as well as the original image URL from Leonardo.ai so that I can preview the image without having to click into the blog post. So I'm going to make sure that it's on target and it's ready to go. Then I can go ahead and proceed to WordPress to check the review or check the draft. And the final step here is to update the status within the Airtable base, letting you know that that keyword has been processed. And so once that is all done, if there are additional keywords, then it'll loop all the way back to this beginning and go through this process once again. So next, let me show you what the outputs look like. We're back in Airtable, and you guys can see here that for this keyword, the status has been updated to draft blog post ready. And within WordPress, the post itself is ready to go. If I click into it, we've got the content that was generated, the featured image is set, and the RankMath plugin is updated with the focus keyword here, as well as the meta description. So you guys will want to fine tune this a little bit, but overall, it looks like everything worked. And if I click into the media section, you can see here that I've run a lot of different tests getting this prepared. And overall, based on my brand guidelines, which is sort of using the color black as a primary color with accents of orange and green, you can see that this has pretty much stayed on brand as far as the image creation is concerned. So this is the workflow, and I thank you for watching if you've stuck around all the way here. And also thank you if you proceed to purchasing and downloading this workflow. Appreciate the support. Take care.